This talk was given by Roshi Rafe Martin, guiding teacher of the Endless Path Zendo, a lay Buddhist community in Rochester, New York. Join our practice, in person or online, at endlesspathzendo.org.
So today is Saturday, May 18th, 2024. And today we'll look at a koan in the Gateless Barrier. Again, we had a theme for a while of pilgrimage. This time the pilgrimage is Bodhidharma to your own front yard. And if we mean to fulfill our own pilgrimage to maturity, that's the point of Zen. It's not to make us Asian in any way or special in any way, but to help us mature as the people we each are, to be as complete and full and compassionate and wise, you, as we can be. This will be our pilgrimage as well, to right where we are, our own front yard, kind of like the end of The Wizard of Oz in a way. I think all great literature touches on the same story. The narrative of our own maturing to coming into our own, right where we are. So, this is case 37 of the Gateless Barrier, Kuan in Chinese, Mumonkan in Japanese, Chao-chou's, that would be Chao-chou in Japanese, Chao-chou, the oak tree in the front yard. The case goes like this. A monk asked Chao-chou, what is the meaning of Bodhidharma's coming from the West? Chao-chou said, the oak tree and the front yard. Wu Men's commentary, if you can see intimately into the essence of Chao-chou's response, there is no Shakyamuni in the past and no Maitreya in the future. Wu Men's verse, words do not convey the fact, phrases do not embody the spirit of the mind. Attached to words, your life is lost. Blocked by phrases, you are bewildered. Little note on that verse. Anyone who's done koan practice knows exactly what that means. Attached to words, your life is lost. Blocked by phrases, you are bewildered. So the question, why did Bodhidharma come from the West, is a traditional Zen way of asking, what is Zen's highest teaching? And how does that relate one to the other? It's like, well, the question, why did Bodhidharma come from the West, is really, why did Bodhidharma, despite being of a quite advanced age, face the formidable dangers of the journey from southern India to China? Why did he do that? What was the point? In other words, then that becomes a cipher for what's the highest teaching of the Buddhadharma. In other words, why did Bodhidharma make this journey? What is the most important, this important thing that drove him to do this? Why did he do it? So here's a personal anecdote. I was having lunch with Aitken Roshi in an Italian restaurant in Honolulu, and I asked him, so what is this Zen thing? Why do we do it? He answered, happiness. Then he paused. He caught himself mouthing a convenient and comfortable cliche. And so he stopped and actually quietly thought for a moment. And then he said, no. Many people in this world are happy, absorbed in their work, in family, in hobbies, and so on. They are not caught up in themselves and so are happy. But if impermanence has struck you deeply enough that such things can no longer totally satisfy, and if anxiety or a yearning for something more has taken root, then Zen can show you the way to happiness in the very face of universal impermanence and your awareness of it. So the secret of happiness resides at the core of Zen. Old, gruff Bodhidharma had a soft heart and wanted us to be happy. But can we as ordinary human beings today find happiness? Our times are so complex and troubled. Do we even have the right to be happy when so many are suffering and so many lies and so much greed is rampaging on the loose. To be honest, shouldn't we be glum, if not downright depressed? Maybe we should just hide out from thinking about old age, sickness, injustice, death, politics, and all that seems to be going so horribly wrong. And just as Neil Postman put it in the title of his popular book back in the early 70s, entertain ourselves to death. Yet wasn't this the Buddha's question too? How to be happy in the face of impermanence? Isn't that why he left home? What is the truth he found that brought that half smile to his lips in the very teeth of loss, anxiety, and anguish, that the recognition of our own impermanence and everyone's and the world's rouses in us? If people think that Buddhism is pessimistic, how do they explain that little smile on the Buddha's face? I mean, at 29 years of age, he became totally anguished about impermanence. Most of us probably don't hit that till middle age or much later in life, where it really sinks in. Impermanence is talking about me. It's not some like Buddhist idea. I'm impermanent. Gee. Well, it hit him so hard at 29, and he went off to face it directly. How come that smile if Buddhism is supposed to be glum? So can we, in such troubled times as our own, also find what he found? Do we dare? I mean, happiness in the face of such gathered difficulties, injustices, can seem not only trivial, but too radical to even believe. It seems like no more than a guilty pleasure. How can you be happy? Which is why we can also find ourselves taking refuge in the Protestant ethic, the practical American outlook on Zen, which is the work rather than the happiness it offers. Indeed, we can even make it a special virtue for our Zen to be about hard work, sacrifice, perseverance, courage, exertion. A road carved by and for samurai. Of course, that's only the trappings. Layman Pong was sitting in his thatched cottage one day, and difficult, he said, like trying to scatter 10 measures of sesame seed all over a tree. Easy, Mrs. Pong said, like touching your feet to the ground when you get out of bed. Neither difficult nor easy, Ling Jiao, that's their daughter. She's in our ancestral line, along with Layman Pong. Ling Jiao said, on the 100 grass tips, the ancestors' meaning. It's right in front of you, the oak tree in the front garden. But given our culturally ingrained habits of self-centered thinking and living, a degree of effort and courage is needed if we mean to move past all that holds, binds, and limits our true human potential. Still, the samurai is not exactly what Zen is about. What is it about? This too lies behind that unknown monk's question to the great teacher of his time, Chao-chou. What is Zen really about? What is the highest, purest, truest, deepest teaching of the Buddhadharma, of the Buddha himself? Why, in short, did Bodhidharma come from the West? Let's get down to it. What is the highest, most essential teaching? In the Shoyoroku Book of Serenity, we find that a monk asked Seigon, what is the essence of Buddhism? Seigon said, what is the price of rice in Roryo? What's the price of rice in Roryo? If it's that simple, why then did Bodhidharma, an old man, make the risky journey? Lots of ships never made it, and many earnest pilgrims drowned. Why did he take on the burden of transmitting the Dharma, risk his life to do it, when he could have been taking it easy? What made it all worth it? He wasn't simply welcomed when he arrived in China with open arms either. Chinese Buddhist teachers of the time hated him so much they tried to poison him. What was the big deal? By the time Bodhidharma, and by the way, according to legend, he was not only quite old when he made the journey from India to China, but like the Buddha Shakyamuni himself, was an ex-Indian prince. When he arrived in China, Buddhism had already been there for a couple of hundred years, and this would have been around 500 of the Common Era. There were devotional and meditative practices. There were sutra reading, commentary, leading to a practice of purification and the accumulation of personal merit and mindfulness. What then did Zen Buddhism, Bodhidharma's Buddhism, offer that caused such a hubbub? Not only was an attempt made on Bodhidharma's life, but the second ancestor, Wei Ke, was actually murdered by the governor of a province to stop him from teaching it. What is the highest, deepest truth of the Buddha's teaching? Why is it so revolutionary and radical? Radical in the sense of meaning going to the root. That's the essential, or one essential meaning of radical. Going to the root. And if it is extreme and radical, how could it be simple enough to bring true happiness, as Aitken Roshi pointed out? If it's so out there as a teaching, so radical, so revolutionary, wouldn't we have to become punk or something equally outrageous ourselves to really get it? So why do we, as ordinary as we actually are, practice Zen? Maybe we have a personal reason or not. Maybe we've just found ourselves drawn to it, or that we have to do it because somehow doing it makes sense in a way that other things just don't, or don't enough. There are, as you've all probably figured out by now, I don't know about much, but anyway, easier, less demanding, less ego-challenging paths. Doksan in Zen is challenging and revealing, and it can be stressful at times. This practice of going alone, and that's the literal meaning of Doksan, going alone, takes for granted our own willingness to accept challenge for the sake of a higher purpose. Call that purpose truth. Called a way to happiness that does not disregard facts. It's not about closing our eyes to things that are difficult or putting on rose-colored glasses and going, everything's really fine. Doksan implies a willingness to get stuck, to come to the end of logic as a life path, but not as a useful tool, of course. And to come to the end of reason as our only guide, and attain to an actual life of wholeness and intuition, out of which logic and reason themselves arise. And this takes faith in ourselves and in the experience of the Buddha, who 2,500 years ago exclaimed, "Wonder of wonders. All living beings are Buddhas, already fully endowed with wisdom and virtue. Only their own habitually self-centered thinking hides this from them." If we believe that the Buddha wasn't a fool or he wasn't a liar when he said that, then faith in this becomes courage. We must find out what he was talking about, because all living beings means me. Where's my wisdom? Where's my compassion? What was the Buddha saying? What is the highest teaching of the Buddhadharma? Of course, paths that are less challenging may also be less rewarding. Nothing worthwhile, as many sayings present it, has been attained without challenge, perseverance, courage, effort. Zen stories presenting our legendary history as well as our historic lineage offer an inspiring record of the lives and efforts of those who came before us and the work they put in, and the challenges they faced. In short, Zen history offers a record of blood, sweat, and tears, all of which was shed for ordinary people like you and me to shed to free themselves of what Blake called our mind-forged manacles. One of the most central of such founding stories is that of Wei Ke, who became Bodhidharma's most significant disciple. Wei Ke, a learned monk, reached the end of all his learning and thinking, and at that dead end, yet having faith in the Buddha's words, became desperate to know the truth personally. He needed to know his own nature, his own self, the way he knew that water was hot or cold. It had to be personally known. He'd read and he'd studied and he'd done meditation, but now that was no longer enough. He had to know. Hearing of the new teacher Bodhidharma, Wei Ke climbed a mountain in winter and stood in the snow, begging to receive this potent new teaching, the highest teaching of the Buddhadharma, beyond all words and letters, pointing directly to mind itself, thereby becoming Buddha. And he was rebuffed. Legend says that Wei Ke then cut off his own arm to prove his resolve. So this highest teaching must have been worth something indeed. That's the whole point of that story. Indeed, later, after becoming a teacher himself, Wei Ke was killed for teaching Bodhidharma's radical Zen. The governor of the province feared it would shake up the social order. Why? How did all this, 400 or so years after Bodhidharma, become simply the oak tree in the front garden? That's what Wei Ke cut off his arm to get? The oak tree in the front garden? That's what he was killed for teaching? The oak tree in the front garden? Is the great Chao-chou telling us that Bodhidharma was so compassionate that he came even for the sake of this tree? Buddhist tradition holds that all beings are Buddha, even a dog, as the first koan of the Gateless Barrier makes clear, or even a finger, as another case early on in the Gateless Barrier puts it, or a beard, as another case towards the beginning of the Gateless Barrier puts it. So is Chao-chu's meaning that the highest teaching of the Buddhadharma is boundless compassion for all things, even in this case, a tree, plants? Or might he have gone deeper and meant this oak tree is Buddha? Or that all beings are Buddha, even this tree? Alas, if so, we've wandered off among the reeds and grasses, lost ourselves and Bodhidharma and Chao-chou in concepts and notions, and in that soil a real oak tree cannot possibly flourish. This question of the meaning of Bodhidharmas coming from the West would have been deeply intimate for the Chinese Zen teachers who came after Bodhidharma. Their own awakenings have been made possible by Bodhidharma's efforts. For them, it was not abstract, but personal and specific. The Buddha may have opened the path, but Bodhidharma made that path work in China, indeed, made it China's own. He took the core, the essential point of Indian Buddhism, which he himself had personally realized, and speaking from the heart of his own realization, brought forth Zen. Additionally, for Chinese Buddhists of the time, the West, why did Bodhidharma come from the West, literally meant India, the land to their west, the ancestral home of the great teacher, the Buddha. And so for those Chinese Buddhists, India was the Holy Land. But the West also implies not only the Holy Land on earth, but the Western paradise of Amitabha Buddha, Buddha of boundless light. So the question additionally asks, why did Bodhidharma, traditionally seen as an emanation of Avalokiteshvara or Kanon, Bodhisattva of compassion, come down from the Western paradise to China with its wars, intrigues, and political tangles? What did he bring? And what was so important that he was motivated to make that cosmically compassionate journey? Here is part of the first case of the Blue Cliff record, Pian Lu in Chinese, Hekigonoku in Japanese. The emperor in this first case did not understand Bodhidharma's response when he was asked about the highest teaching. Bodhidharma answered, "Vast emptiness, nothing to be called holy," presenting that as the essence of the Dharma. And when he was asked, who are you? In other words, the Emperor Wu, who is known for his good works, said, well, aren't you a holy man? If there's nothing holy, who are you? Bodhidharma answered, I don't know. The emperor did not get it at all. And seeing how this was going, Bodhidharma then left. He crossed the Yangtze River, came to the kingdom of Wei, and there he went up to a cave in the mountain above Shaolin Monastery and settled down to 9 years of focused zazen. And the case goes on. Later, the emperor brought this up to Prince Chi, who asked, "Does your majesty know who this man is?" The emperor said, "I don't know." Prince Chi said he is the Bodhisattva of Avalokiteshvara, transmitting the Buddha mind seal. The emperor felt regretful and wanted to send an emissary to invite Bodhidharma, who had come from the Western paradise, as an emissary of the Bodhisattva of Avalokiteshvara or Kuan, to beg him to return. But Prince Chi said, "Your Majesty, it is no good sending a messenger to fetch him back. Even if everyone in the whole country were to go after him, he still would not return." Once spring comes, the snows melt. You cannot call them back. Once the sun rises, the day gets bright. What is the highest teaching? Isn't it fundamental, not just to our practice, but to our lives? Don't we yearn to realize the most meaningful perspective on our own all too brief time here? The Emperor of China certainly did, but Bodhidharma's response to his inquiry into the highest teaching left him profoundly baffled. Sigh. Even Bodhidharma had his failures, and yet this failure was wonderful indeed, for it led to Wei Ke's meeting with Bodhidharma and eventually the whole line of Zen's ongoing Dharma, which has come down to us and is now our responsibility to realize, embody, actualize, and pass forward. My 3 pillars of Zen, which I've stated recently a bunch of times, is showing up, waking up, growing up. It's up to each of us. And if not us, who? And if not now, when? And that's a quote from the ancient rabbi Hillel. If not me, who? If not now, when? The great Chao-chou, who spoke of the oak tree and the front garden, had another way of putting it. He spoke about making water, even something simple as this, I must do for myself. Making water. Even something as simple as this I must do for myself. If not me, who? And if not now, when? Half a century or so after this initial encounter, Chao-chou was also asked about the highest meaning or first principle of Buddhism. Same as Bodhidharma was asked by the Emperor Wu. But it was now couched as we know, why did Bodhidharma come from the West? His answer, the oak tree in the front garden, also leaves many people as baffled as the Emperor Wu had been. How does speaking of a tree answer the question of the meaning of our life, yours and mine? How does it reveal the deep reason for Bodhidharma's dangerous journey over the seas, a journey that eventually transformed China, Korea, Japan, Vietnam, and is now deeply affecting the Americas, Australia, and Europe? By the way, New Zealand as well, of course. By the way, this koan is sometimes translated as the cypress tree in the front garden. And when Rose and I, along with Sunyana Roshi and her extended Sangha, visited Chao-chou's monastery, Bai Lin, or Cypress Garden, back in 2006, we saw that very tree. And while the tree we saw was one that had been grown from a cutting of the original tree, because the original tree stood 1,000 years ago, so this may have been the second or third cutting, for all we know. But we can still say that that tree still lives today. Chao-chou, as you know, was one of the greatest of the Tong-era Zen teachers, that golden age of Zen. He had his first realization at the age of 18. At 58, he had a profoundly complete satori. After that, he traveled for another 30 years, checking himself and his understanding against the teachers of his time. At the age of 80, he first settled down, began to teach, and then taught until his own death at 120. The odd expression that other great teachers use when speaking of Chao-chou is that his lips flashed light. He did not rely on the stick or the shout. His revelatory words were so quiet and subtle. They came in below the radar, so seemingly ordinary, integrated into the ordinary moments of a life. You'd hardly know he'd already presented it fully and moved on. The koan Mu is from Chao-chou, as is wash your bowls, which goes, a monk came to his monastery and meeting Chao-chou said, "I'm new here." Chao-chou said, "Have you eaten?" "Your rice gruel." "I have," said the monk. "Wash your bowl," responded Chao-chou. That's case 7 of the Gateless Barrier. Some assume he's offered the monk wise advice regarding practice. "You've got something, do you? All right, clean it out, empty it out, keep going." But the Dharma dies, and the oak tree withers right there. This useful point is not the koan's fundamental or essential point. What is the essential point? What is the highest teaching of the Buddhadharma? Wash your bowl. I think of Aitken Roshi as the Chao-chou of our time. He was quiet and subtle. Dogen, who is very sparing in his praise of even the greatest of the old teachers, simply called Chao-chou the ancient Buddha. High praise indeed. Chao-chou's humility, for all his tremendous skill, understanding, and depth of practice, is noteworthy. When he set out on pilgrimage, he said, "If I meet a 7-year-old child whose understanding is greater than my own, I will learn from her. If I meet a 100-year-old man whose understanding is less than mine, I will teach him." Given the Confucian structures of society and the respect for age and elders implicit at that time in China, we can see that Chao-chou's uncompromising stand in truth alone, that societal conventions of propriety were no longer even a lingering issue for him. Of course, this has nothing to do with ignoring proprieties or ethics, but is itself the deepest humility. As to the oak tree or cypress tree koan, the original dialogue continues a bit further. Here's the rest. Chao-chou was asked by a monk, "What is the meaning of Bodhidharma's coming from India?" Chao-chou said, "The cypress tree in the garden." The monk said, "Reverend, please do not use an object to guide me." Chao-chou said, "I am not using an object." The monk said, "What is the meaning of Bodhidharma's coming from India?" Chao-chou said, "The cypress tree in the garden." an object suggests that the monk saw Chao-chu's response as implying inner and outer worlds and was challenging him. But Aitken Roshi says, don't suppose that the resolution of this point lies in the identity of inside and outside. That is philosophy. What is the true fact? Later, other monks heard of Chao-chu's response and came to test him and themselves. So a monk asked Chao-chu, has the oak tree Buddha nature? You remember the first case of the Gateless Barrier. Does even a dog have Buddha nature? Chao-chu responded to that with moo. So here a monk asks him, has the oak tree Buddha nature? Chao-chu said, it has. The monk said, when does the oak attain Buddhahood? Chao-chu said, when the great universe collapses. The monk said, when does the great universe collapse? When does the great universe collapse? Scientists are working on that at the moment. Doesn't that only human beings can feel despair to think that maybe 10 billion years in the future, the universe will collapse. What will we do then? In any case, Chao-chu said, in response to the question, when does the great universe collapse? Chao-chu said, when the oak tree attains Buddhahood. Right, there it is. When does the great universe collapse? When the oak tree attains Buddhahood. There's nothing ironic about that. He's not brushing off that monk. When the sky rolls back and the ground beneath our feet disappears, what remains? At such a moment, Zen's Chicken Little is overcome with laughter. Wumen's commentary says, if you can see intimately into the essence of Chao-chu's response, there is no Shakyamuni in the past and no Maitreya in the future. What is there then? Who is there then? Wumen underscores his main point by saying, if you can see intimately. What is intimately? Thoughts about Buddhism and its meaning remain proximate Zen, that is a Zen of concepts, which while interesting and useful, won't solve our fundamental dilemma of how to live compassionately and happily and die with a degree of peace. Mindfulness can get us to the gate, but Zen flings the gate wide, revealing the gate to be no gate, the barrier to be no barrier. After getting our head through the gateless gate, Zen then helps us set off, staff in hand, to explore what had initially seemed so far off, but was actually our own native land. This maturing, this endlessly unfolding path of wisdom and compassion is summed up in our great vows for all. The many beings are numberless. I vow to free them all. Greed, hatred, and ignorance rise endlessly. I vow to abandon them all. Dharma gates are countless. I vow to wake to them all. Buddha way, or Buddha's way, is unattainable. I vow to embody it all. It's unattainable. Why? But I vow to embody it all. How? Wumen's verse to the case of the oak tree goes like this. Words do not convey the fact. Language is not an expedient. Attached to words, your life is lost. Blocked by phrases, you are bewildered. Words do not convey the fact. What is the fact of the tree? Language is not merely an expedient. Words themselves are or can be just this. Yet the word water allays no thirst, and the word rice eases no hunger. Attached to words, life is lost. Our true and intimate life, the one we live or might live if has and has not, no longer obscures it from us. that life is gone. With our attachment to words, we drink a cup of tea, and the cup is merely some idea we have in our hand. We no longer really are aware of its texture, the feel of the glaze, the rough spots and the smooth. The taste of tea is an afterthought. It's not a living presence. Our life is lost. That's our life, lost, attached to words. Identifying with thoughts, eating from the judgmental tree of good and evil, we fall from the garden. With that fall, I am somewhere vaguely in here, and you and everything else somewhere vaguely out there. And so our garden withers. But Chao-chou's oak is rooted in the original front garden and can be our own re-entrance into it. To be blocked by phrases stuck in koan after koan. Again, there are maybe 1,500 koans that we work on in our curriculum after an initial koan like mu or the sound of a single hand. And that means there may be 800 or so main koans and then subsidiary parts. They add up to 1,500, 2,000. I don't know. I've never done the count. But there's a number. Stuck in koan after koan may not be so bad because we are stuck, because we have come to the end of what logic alone can offer, and because we are bewildered. I like that. Bewildered. It's kind of like bewilded. We're out there. We have a real chance of stepping out of that old, confusing mental maze and seeing past the too small fish bowl of our overly mental life because we are bewildered. And now know that we are bewildered. We can cross our legs, experience our breath, commit single-mindedly to a koan, count breaths. 1, 2, 3. Experience this breath and keep going until we and the oak and all things and all no things fall away and just oak tree in the front garden. This koan became a big deal in Zen circles in ancient China. After Chao-chou's death, Fan came to one of Chao-chou's heirs named Hui Chao and asked, "I heard that your late master had a saying, the oak tree in the courtyard. Is that correct?" Hui Chao said, "No." Fan said, "Anyone who's been around at all will say that a monk asked him about the meaning of Bodhidharma's coming from the West and that he answered, the oak tree in the courtyard. How can you maintain he didn't say it?" Hui Chao said, "He really didn't say it. Please don't slander him." Aiken Roshi, who quotes this story, says that this last bit may have been said forcefully with a degree of ire, given the word slander. What then, asks Aiken Roshi, was his meaning? Some teachers have even said that this dialogue that I've just recited to you is as great a koan as that of the oak tree in the front garden. No, he really didn't say it. Don't slander him. While such bewilderment may be uncomfortable, we can't sneak past it by bringing the self forward to become one with the oak. Dogen says that that is a kind of dualistic deception. Rather, by letting the koan work on us, like a thief in the night, it will both gradually and suddenly steal away all we cling to, even ourselves. With faith in our nature and in the ongoing practice realization of it, we can let the acorns fall as they may. Zen Master Dogen remains our touchstone. He wrote, "When we push the self forward to become one with the 10,000 things, it is called delusion. When the 10,000 things step in and realize themselves as the self, it is called realization or intimacy." realization, or intimacy. In his commentary on this case, in his book titled Gateless Barrier, Eiken Roshi tells a story of Shido Munan, Hakuin's Dharma grandfather, who was traveling with a quantity of gold he'd collected to build a monastery. A skillful bandit saw him and, sensing wealth about this person, followed him to an inn. That night, the bandit stole into Munin Zenji's room, but when he quietly slid back the shoji screen, he was overwhelmed to see not a monk sleeping there, but a great oak tree with its roots digging into the floor and its branches pushing against the ceiling. Trembling, the robber withdrew. In the morning, he asked Shidomunin to please accept him as a disciple. In time, he went on to become a realized monk. Eiken Roshi adds, he knew true intimacy when he saw it. He knew true intimacy when he saw it. Blake wrote, "The fool sees not the same tree that the wise man sees." Blake probably meant something very direct with this, but from a Zen perspective, there might be another way to look at it. The fool might see the tree better than a wise man. A wise man can be lost in his own superb and wonderful wisdom, while a fool has nothing at all in mind. Who sees more truly? Regardless, Blake's point remains. Blake's wise man, if we take it as we assume Blake meant it, looks at a tree and sees a living being, woven into the fabric of life, uniquely precious, a being with wonderfully gnarled skin and veined leaves, a resplendent and beautiful form sagely offering life and protection to countless other beings, giving oxygen so we can breathe, offering fruit, offering shelter, offering shade from heat. Blake's fool looks at a tree and sees only so much lumber, produce, or perhaps an ornament for the lawn, or perhaps they see an impediment blocking their view, a thing worth so much money or costing so much money to maintain or to remove. What tree do you see? But Chao-chu's oak tree is so alive. Zen tradition says it's like a gift that, like a gifted thief, it can rob us of what Bob Dylan in Tombstone Blues called all our pointless, useless knowledge. Freed of such habitual blinders, the meaning of Bodhidharma's coming from the West stands nakedly revealed, which is why, despite the terrors of our splintered, unhappy, angrily polarized times, indeed, in fact, because of them, because of the very terrors of our time, Eiken Roshi could say that Zen can help each of us with our eyes wide open and refusing to put on rose-colored glasses, actually walk the ancient path or way to genuine happiness. Thank goodness for the oak tree still growing in the front garden. We'll stop here and recite our great vows for all